Welcome everyone. In today's video I'll be making this little retro hamper, and I'll also be making a medicine cabinet. Come and join me, won't you? Before I get started, I thought it would be a good idea if I introduced you to Aunt Clara's house. I started Aunt Clara's house in the summer of 2021. I had just moved into a smaller apartment and really needed to go to a smaller scale. That's why I decided to go with 1/16. This house was the first time that I worked with scale, so it was very challenging. Plus it was very challenging to figure out where to start and how to start building. Let me take you inside. This house is also in my introduction video, and not much has changed since that video. But here's where I want to work today. I want to work in the bathroom. It's going to be a tight squeeze to be able to film it, but I'm going to try to get it for you. In addition to what I've already made for this bathroom, I hope to make a hamper and a medicine cabinet today. And some pieces that I already have, and you've probably seen this tub before. I showed it, I think, briefly in my Old West bathhouse video. I just made this one look a little bit more girly. So my idea was to place the tub over here in the corner. And then I constructed this toilet. And this toilet, it's funny, it was inspired by 3D printing because I always noticed that the 3D printing had lines in it. And so I figured, hey, why don't I use layers of paper to create a toilet? So that's how this came about. And so I imagine that sitting about right there. And then here is the vanity. So I picture putting a medicine cabinet over here, of course, above the sink with a mirror. Maybe right here in this little corner that you cannot see, I'm thinking I'll put a hamper there because I may put a plant on a plant stand over here in front of the window to give them a little bit of privacy. We'll have to put up some curtains for privacy for Aunt Clara. Let's get started with the medicine cabinet and the hamper. I'm always looking for newfound texture and things to use with paper. Every time I grocery shop and I pick up potatoes or onions, I've been saving a few of these pieces. I did an experiment and I glued some down to cardstock and I let it dry for a long time, and I've also painted it. I've noticed that I was afraid that when I cut it, it might start to fray. It's not fraying. And I don't know if that's because I've used wood glue or what, and it's also very flexible. I'm excited about this material. I'm thinking this will make an interesting basket look for the outside of my hamper. First, I'm going to give this piece of cardstock a really kind of thick layer of wood glue. And then I'm going to take a piece of this mesh and just lay it in it. Give it another coat of wood glue. And now I'm going to lay this other piece right over it. On top of this last layer, I'm going to go ahead and paint it with some wood glue. And I probably should take it off of here before it dries onto it. You just want to make sure that it's all covered with the glue. When it's dry, if you feel like there's parts that are lifted or that aren't glued down, give it one more coat. Let it dry. It's probably really best to let it dry overnight. I traced out what I thought the base shape of the hamper would be. Trace it out onto some, this is that small corrugated cardboard. And I call it small corrugated because it's really small. I don't have any of the large here, but the large has the bigger holes. So I'm going to trace out 4 of them. Once you get them all traced, go ahead and cut them out. And I'm just going to glue them together. I'm using some of this Aleene's Fast Grab Tacky glue. Give your piece a good curving. Help train it to go in the direction that you want it to go. And I'm just lining it up with the back edge. I'm just holding it till that glue catches. I may put a rubber band around it. And I'm just going to come down a little bit. I could put some fake laundry in there. I really should have some rubber bands at my desk. I made myself a line to follow. I'm just going to cut off this extra. I just love how you can cut it and it's such a clean cut. I would have really thought when I experimented with this that it would start fraying. I was thinking about just putting some glue on these edges and just gluing it down to some cereal box or food packaging, but I decided to go ahead and just I just took the measurements and I decided to go ahead and cut my back out, and I'm going to glue it on. And I'm going to be using the Aleene's Fast Grab Tacky glue again. The measurements of my little hamper is 1 1/4 wide and 1.5 inches high. I might have been able to go down a little bit lower with this piece here, but I think that's good enough because you could always glue some fabric and stuff in there to look like the clothes if you wanted it with the lid open. If not, it wouldn't really matter because you could just have a piece hanging out and the lid closed. I noticed a lot of the hampers too have like a little band at the bottom, and some of them even have a band that's going down each side. So I want mine to look that way. They aren't the basket material, they're actually made, they look like a vinyl. So I'm thinking about using this that comes off of, you know, like beans or dog food or rice, the bulk bags. I've cut off a strip of this and I'm going to use that because I like the texture that this has. It kind of reminded me of leather, like from my hat box video, and I'm thinking it'll work for the vinyl. I'm going to put my band, I think, right where the bend starts. If you don't have this type of paper, cardstock would work too. For the braided piece that they have at the top of the hampers that looks like it's made out of the basket material itself, I'm going to use this paper that it's packing paper that I've scrunched up and I've twirled it into a strand. I'll use that. I paper quilled these little feet, and I'm going to glue these onto the bottom of the hamper. It's starting to look like a hamper. I made some little handles. Now I'm just going to glue them onto the side of the hamper. It's part of a punch that I had. I'm just going to place it right there. Next, I painted it a vintage green, and I gave it a wash of brown paint and water. To create the lid, I'm tracing it onto cardstock. Then I added a lip before I cut it out. To attach the lid, I used part of a Tyvek envelope. It looks a lot like paper, but it won't tear like paper does. And you could use a strip of fabric too if you don't happen to have the Tyvek. I need to paint it now to make it match the hamper. For the medicine cabinet, I already have all the pieces cut out, and the way I went about it, because there were so many little pieces, I took some food packaging and I went ahead and doubled it up before I cut the pieces. And my food packaging, I think it was a cereal box, an older one that I've had in my stash. So it was pretty heavy, and when I measured the thickness of 2 layers, it came out to be a 1/16 of an inch. And that's exactly what I needed. So I only had to glue the 2 layers of the food packaging together. And then I just cut everything off of that piece. I will have all of my measurements in the description, but yours may be different. You might be working in a different scale, so you might have to adjust them. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the sides on to this back piece. And the side is longer than the back. That was to allow room for the bottom. When I glued the layers of the food packaging together, I sanded the print side on both pieces, then I glued them together. That way I ended up with pieces that were the brown color on both sides with no print. So what I did was I marked the center and then I measured out a 1/2 inch from each side. And that gave me the placement line for the inner bar that we'll be adding on in a little bit. Measure a 1/16 of an inch over from that. Give yourself the area where the inner bar will go. My medicine cabinet is going to have a towel bar right here under the mirror. If you don't want the towel bar there, instead of having 2 small bottom pieces, you could make that piece all one piece. I'm trying to keep my hands out of the way for you so you can see what's going on. And the bottom's glue on just like that. I'm going to put a little glue on the edge of the inner bar and also some glue on one end. I'm just looking at my marks and lining it up. And now I'm going to be gluing the top number 1 on. Number 1, I also curved the edges. Now I'll keep this piece flat, and I'm going to take the edge that's flat here that I did not sand. I'm gluing it to the back too, and then I'm on both sides here. I'm going to try to make it be even with there's a little lip that each side's going to have hanging over. I think it would be best to go ahead and glue the towel bar on now because there's more room for your fingers to work around it. I think the towel rod should go pretty low. I went ahead and glued in the shelves, and the way I did it, except for the bottom shelf, but it kind of worked itself out. The way I did it is I started up at the top, and I have these strips that I'm using as spacers, and I put them in, and they're the height that I want the shelf to be. So the two bottom ones are 9/16 of an inch high, and then these are 1/2 inches. The next piece I'm working on will fit on this area, and I don't know what to call it, so I'm going to call it decor piece. So there is a front and back and sides. I'm going to glue the front and the back to this edge of the side piece. I'm gluing top 2 to top 3, but I'm keeping one of the long sides even with each other and trying to center it on there the best that I can because one's slightly larger than the other. And now I'm going to glue this top section to this decorative piece, and I'm going to keep the straight edge even with the back of the decorative piece. And I'm just keeping an eye on the lip, make sure it looks pretty even all the way around. And then this piece just glues right onto the medicine cabinet. Create a little lip on each side, make sure that's centered. Keep the back edges flat. I have an old punch that I used and cut apart, and I ended up with some of these little shapes. I'm going to glue these down into a little shape on the top of the cabinet. Here's how it turned out. I don't know if you can see it very well, but I went ahead and drew out how I want the shape of the mirror to be on the cabinet. I decided to go with a lighter green than what I did the hamper. I cut a piece of cardstock for the mirror back and a piece of silver scrapbook paper the same size. I glued them together, and now I'm scratching the edges a little, and that way the glue will grab the mirror front better. I had to paint the edges because I could see some of the silver, and then I glued the mirror onto the medicine cabinet. And here's a close-up of the finished medicine cabinet. I embellished it with some bottles and things that I thought she might have in her bathroom, and I added a little bit of lace to the bottom to look like maybe she tucked some little doilies there hanging over the edge, and I also put a little bit of shelf paper. I think Aunt Clara will be happy with this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.